Hello everyone, hope you're doing great. So after a very long time, we are back again with the editorial analysis, and we now believe that we'll be more consistent in this. And let's start with it. So this article is about geopolitics and geoeconomics. Basically, what we can understand from this article, or where in which category we can put this article in, is about economics and international affairs as well. Let's understand what this article is. It's an easy article relatively, but it tells you about the solutions that India can take in terms of bilateral or multilateral relations. And let's start the article and understand what it's saying. So basically, what the author wants to say in this is that the um, author wants to say that India is right now not very forefront in the area of having multilateral relations. There are a few examples that the author puts, and we can use those examples as it is in our answers. So the first paragraph, it says that temptations to militarize or scrutinize the Quad. The Quad is four countries: Australia, Japan, India, and United States, and has ensured that the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, that is Asian, ASEAN, states do not feel uneasy by the ever increasing balance of power articulations in the Indo Pacific. Now, the whole article is about the Indo Pacific geopolitics or geoeconomics. What he's saying is that the approach that India is right now following is a little half baked and unsustainable. And why the author puts it this way is because he says that the geoeconomic developments of the Indo Pacific are not given adequate attention, right? So, what he says is to appreciate the inescapable linkages between geopolitics and geoeconomics, and they are saying that the policymakers are not really putting their foot on this. Even what they are saying is that um, he's given an example of saying that um, India's decision to take the Indo-Pacific and Quad in a big way, to take to the Indo-Pacific and Quad in a big way, while unwilling to join the two of the region's key multilateral trading agreements, goes to show that geoeconomics and geopolitics are imagined and pursued parallelly, not complementary to each other, right? He gives this example in which he says that India's refusal to join the trade pillar of Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, IPEF. IPEF. This is the third acronym that in this article has been presented for international relations. It's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. India has refused to join the trade pillar of this one, but India has agreed to join the three pillars that are supply chains, tax and anti-corruption, and the third one is clean energy. Now, the trade pillar of IPF, India has negated. It has refused that it won't join this. Now, also he says that what IPF is IPEF is a US sponsored soft trade arrangement at best that comes 2 years after India walked out of negotiations on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. This is the fourth acronym that we are seeing in this article. Now, the author again says that out of sync, that what India has been doing in this is, this example gives us a hint of that the foreign policy seems out of sync with the recent enthusiasm in New Delhi about foreign trade agreements, right? What he tends to say is, what he means to say is that we are going forthrightly in the direction of foreign trade agreements, but we are not really going for multilateral agreements in the geo-economic front. That means that we are warming up to the free trade agreements, the FTAs. Example that he gives again is FTA with the United Arab Emirates earlier this year, signed early harvest agreements with Australia and United Kingdom, and there are more FTAs that have been signed. So the government wants to go in that direction, but a clear policy direction in New Delhi by not becoming a part of IPEF and RCEP, and signing FTAs with individual states, the government has made it clear that it favors bilateral agreements and is not keen on multilateral, plurilateral, or even soft agreements such as IPEF. So, if the question, for example, is that give examples to corroborate that why India has not been forthcoming in multilateral or plurilateral relations, but has been very keen on expanding its bilateral relations. So you can very well put all of this in the answer. The points that you can put forward is, the first one is definitely going for FTAs, that India right now is going for free trade agreements. Second, you can say that by declining its position in the IPEF and walking out of RCEP, India has made a very strong position on the international front where it does not want to go for blind trade agreements with a few countries as it is, but it wants to put our interests in the front. The next thing that you can write is the China factor. Of course, you can write this in the answer as well. The steps, there are 4 to 5 points that are given, and you can easily write those in the answers. Absence of the world fifth largest economy from various regional trading platforms will invariably boost China's geoeconomic hegemony in Asia, right? The one thing that is very brilliantly written in this article is that, and it is something that you can also think about, is that it is the Sino-Indian Economic Partnership. Now, what is written in this article about this is that whenever India and China becomes a part of a trade agreement or a multilateral trade agreement in which both of these countries are a part of, China makes sure that India stays dependent on its markets, right? In a sense that our markets are right now dominated with Chinese products, and uh, even after trying so hard, there are so much right now still that is left of the Chinese goods in the market, and this makes us dependent on China for trade purposes, very dependent. So what happens is that this is the part that we have to focus. Deeper Sino-Indian economic partnership could be weaponized by Beijing for geopolitical purposes, and yet the only viable option to deal with such a challenge is to prepare for and face the challenge, even if it means incurring costs in short term, so as to eventually overcome the challenge. What the author means to say is this, that whenever we give an undue advantage to our opponent in the market, they can weaponize this opportunity. Maybe if they say that we are not sending the goods to the market or the supply is hampered from China, you could eventually see that it would affect very badly, or it would be the Indian markets would be worstly affected, because at the end of the supply chain are the customers that are living in India. So it would lead to inflation, it would lead to rise in prices, the markets would be destabilized. So this is something that we have to take care of. We don't have to rely so much on the Chinese goods and the markets. And this is what the government is trying to doing. The government is trying to do. India China trade has only increased in the past year. So, this is what the author is saying. On the contrary, that the reality is, despite the military standoff on the line of actual control that happened recently, the trade between India China has only increased, right? Therefore, it is not possible for India to avoid trading with China. Of course, this is a given situation that we cannot just avoid trading with China. What is better for us to deal with the issue sooner rather than later and in a comprehensive manner? This is also, the author says that this is also an opportunity to do so. For example, the countries such as US to economically decouple from China and to create forums without China on board, the IPEF being one such example. So the US created this multilateral agreement without China on board. India must not shy away from trading with China as a part of multilateral arrangements, while at the same time joining arrangements which have no China presence. The second reason why staying out of IPEF is a bad idea is because for India, it would be a hard it would be hard to integrate itself into the regional and global supply. This is also a very good point that you can write and integrate in the answers. This point says that to integrate itself into the regional and global supply chains without being a part of important regional multilateral trading agreements, it would be difficult. If you want to sell to countries that are, far away or different, or are not really marketed right now, or do not really have the goods, Indian goods right now in the market, these multilateral or regional multilateral agreements are the way to go. These are the solutions for this. Now, when we want to integrate ourselves into a new market, we need to be part of this multilateral agreements, right? The next point that the author puts forward is that um, we have no option but to address some of the deeper challenges plaguing the investment and business environment in India. Consider the fact that even those firms that have left China, that are not many, but due to so-called US decoupling, so US decoupling from China, the companies who have stopped their operations in China, they haven't turned up to India yet. Where are they moving? Where are they going for? They are going to countries such as Vietnam, right? Thereby highlighting the fact that we need to get our house in order. Joining some of these multilateral trading agreements will force us to do precisely that. Because what happens when we do that is we have to arrange our markets in a way where compliance is made sure, supply chain is made sure. So all these things, they make sure that the market, so for example, if a company is manufacturing something in Vietnam and sending it in India, of course the prices are going to be higher. But if the company decides to manufacture in India and sell in India, then the prices become way cheaper. This happens only when India as a market follows some compliance rules that the company has, and the company and the market, the regional markets, are in sync with each other and complementary to each other. So these are all the factors that are responsible and need to be considered while setting up shop in India. But what the author means to say is that we can write this in the answer as well, that many of the countries who stopped operating in China because of the US China decoupling have not shown interest in Indian markets. Instead, they have shifted to South Asian countries such as Vietnam, which highlights the fact that we need to be more aggressively part of multilateral agreements so that India can appear on the map for these companies. The last point, the fourth point that the author puts forward is India is indeed serious about maritime grand strategy, which cannot be solely military in nature. It needs to get the stakes in the region to create economic stakes in India, something China has done cleverly and consistently, and vice versa. More so, without creating economic stakes with the states of region, India's Act East policy will revert to its earlier avatar. Look East. For sure, India does have FTA with the ASEAN, which Modi government has reservations about. But it is also important for India to become part of trading arrangements which have major non-regional states, so as to become a major part of region's supply chain. Yet another impact of India's hesitation about joining regional multilateral trading agreements is its potential regional economic isolation. The less India engages with the region economically, the more China does so, and given the Sino-Indian rivalry, India might risk getting economically isolated in the broader region. So, what this entirely means is, the crux of this entire paragraph is, the author wants to say and wants us to understand that in the Indo Pacific region, China has very cleverly created its ports, markets, dams, for example, and now many of these countries are defaulting in loans. But the crux of the matter is that China has some interest, economic interest in those countries. And it would be a greater onus on China to protect this. It would be greater onus on the country that have these assets to protect this. And hence China and that region for that matter will work together to protect their assets in that country or that region, because both of them have worked together to create those. The author is suggesting this only, that India should create assets or economic assets in these markets, these regional markets. The markets talked about are Indo Pacific, so that we'll have some skin in the game. But I believe this needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, and you can even skip this if you don't want to write this in the answers, because I believe it's a little bit tricky to understand. Contrary to conventional logic, it is possible that the more India is economically isolated in the region, the more China would be able to weaponize trade against India during the times of major bilateral standoffs, should they occur. The end of the article says this only, that the more countries that we deal with, the more countries support us, not just in militarily but economic way, the geoeconomics as we say, the more what should we say, the lesser would be China able to weaponize its trade against us, because we will have our options available and open, and other countries would be with us, supporting us as well. So this is what the author wants to say, I guess. Contrary to conventional logic, of course, we have to prevent this economic isolation that has been mentioned here, and we should not give China a chance to weaponize trade against India. So this line is very good that you can instantly write in your answers: weaponize trade against India. The final thing, of course, to end this article would be to first of all read the acronyms. First is ASEAN, Quad, IPEF, that is Indo Pacific Economic Forum, Economic Framework. Then we also have CPTPP, right? That is Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, right? What the author has to say about this is, India should also rethink its decision not to join the RCEP and seek to join the CPTPP. China is seeking to join, from which the US walked out, and China is seeking to join. If joining all three is radical for us, we should start with the IPEF and the CPTPP, which do not have China on board, and also should proactively lobby to become a part of Minerals Security Partnership, the US led 11 member grouping to secure supply chains of critical minerals. So this also becomes a geography aspect as well, that is Minerals Security Partnership. In times of crisis, the supply chain for critical minerals do not get hampered, and it's US led. The final conclusion that the author quotes is that India seeks to be a part of Asian century and its economic growth. China's share in global trade is 15%, whereas India's is just 2%, right? We have to let go of the historical hesitation and phobia regarding multilateral trade agreements, and the current policy of pursuing geopolitical ends without the geo-economic ballast. Ballast is something that balances, right? Is ill thought out. Final words about this article is that use the wordings that are present here, use the acronyms, use the examples that are present here. No, don't worry if you don't understand every paragraph of this article. Just understand the crux of it, that we are right now promoting just bilateral relations, but we want to get into the game by promoting multilateral relations, and multilateral relations in these frameworks, forums which China is not a part of, so that China does not have an upper hand when it deals with India in terms of geoeconomics or trade. So this was the article. Thank you everyone for joining us. All the best for exams, and do share and subscribe the channel. If you have any questions, do write it in the comment section, and we'll definitely help you out in anything. And we always welcome your feedback. Thank you everyone for watching.